Right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Roshan, producer and presenter for The Morning Run and host of Ringgit and Sense. And welcome to another BFM Personal Finance webinar done in collaboration with the Financial Planning Association of Malaysia, more commonly known as FPAM. On today's webinar, we explore the elements of building a robust financial plan to ensure peace of mind for you and your family in good times and bad. I think this year has really shown us the importance of such a plan. To help me with this afternoon, I have Gunasilin Kanan, licensed financial planner with Blueprint Planning, Inderjit Singh, associate director at CIMB Private Banking, who is a CFP, a certified financial planner, and Malek Ali, as always, founder of GFM Radio and filife, joining me in. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roshan.
Thank you, Roshan.
Thank you, Roshan.
To everyone who is listening, watching with us now on Facebook, we're also on YouTube. If that's your preferred mode, you can just look for the BFM 89.9 channel. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section down below. Especially if it's around estate planning, we are more than happy to tackle these questions with you as we go through this webinar. I want to get straight into it, and we're talking about the financial planning, in good times and bad. Guna, maybe we can start with you. What are the basic parts of a comprehensive financial plan for my family? Because this always sounds difficult to do. It sounds complicated. Could you help break this down for us?
Yeah, Roshan. So the basic parts, maybe I can categorize in two categories. The first one I will say is the life value, and the second one is the monetary value. The first one, we want to discuss about the life value. There are a few elements in life value. The first thing we normally ask before we develop a family financial plan is what is the aspiration of the family? That means what they want to achieve. Normally, aspiration should help us to determine what we want to experience in terms of our life planning. That's what we call aspiration. That's something we want to achieve. The family wants to achieve. Number two is the culture the family wants to instill into the finance. What are the risk-taking habits they have? Are they high risk taker, moderate risk taker, low risk taking? What is the spending pattern? How prudent are they in spending their money? So if you look at the culture, there are different individuals have a different culture. I will say some people, they like to fly high because they want people to see them. Right. Some people are on the ground, and some are we call it submarine. They like to move their wealth. They don't want to show their wealth. So there are three types of categories. Some need to be seen. Some always on the ground. Some they are like a submarine. They don't want to show up. So we need to understand who are these people culture. Yes, Malek. Malek, you are mute. Malek, you're mute.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to ask, where would you put Najib Guna?
No comment.
You don't have to answer.
So I like how you broke that down, Guna. You've got the life value part, you've got the monetary value part. And I presume in the monetary value part, we're talking about cash flow, net worth, retirement fund, education, insurance, and estate planning. Right? These are all the different typical things that we think about when we look at financial planning. But the life value part is also a very significant part. Aspiration, culture, family involvement, especially the culture and aspiration. We forget how important that is when it comes to any form of financial planning. We try our best to not have these different elements, but we must acknowledge it. Inderjit, do you have anything to add to that, to the basic understanding of how to build a financial plan that covers all our bases?
Yes, Roshan. I think the other component that I want to add on will be risk management, because most families do not take into consideration where one person may die early, right? And disability. Then what about if I'm medically unfit to manage my employment? Then how do I go about it? I have no income. And this is a very important component of risk management that should be addressed by every family when you do a financial plan. Yeah.
Right. Malek, do you have anything to add there before we? Oh, sorry, Guna. Yes.
Yeah. Another thing, Roshan, the family financial plan also should be very inclusive. Some of my clients do bring their children into the family financial plan when there is a discussion, a meeting. They do bring the children and the spouse. So, family financial plan, and what is the difference between individual financial plan and family financial plan? It's involved the family. It's very inclusive.
When you involve the family there, how important is that? Like from your own experience in getting the kids and the spouse involved in the finances?
Yeah, when the family gets involved, the message is delivered well. They know the family, the leader of the family knows where they are heading actually, and the struggle or the happiness which the family is going through is shared by everyone. So the family bonding is better actually.
Right, and I guess it also gives context to everybody, right? Because sometimes you have heads of households trying to hide the true financial nature of what's going on. Maybe they're doing a submarine with the financial nature of things because they don't want it to come out. But sometimes it can be very counterintuitive, and when you get the family involved, at least there's more understanding and context towards everything. Malek, do you have anything to add on here before we talk about financial commitments?
Yeah, I think it's about sharing. I think just to give you an example, I have a Google family. I have a space on my personal Gmail, Google Drive, where I actually share a family asset spreadsheet with my wife, right? And I say to my kids, if something happens to me, you know my password, so you can access it too. But if only something happens to me, I put the password. And I actually don't give them password. I actually put it in a safe. And there is and there's my passwords there. In case mommy can't access it, then you can at least access it for her. So I think we share a Google Doc, which is only between the two of us, where we actually put all I put so that she knows where everything is. All the Swiss bank accounts, all the Cayman Island bank accounts. I'm just kidding. I'm just all the bank accounts, all the the stocks and things like that. And I actually every time I do a kind of like a net worth calculation because markets are fluctuating and all that, I actually update it and I update it on the spreadsheet for her. Yeah.
Do you, Malek, on a personal level, do you think that's helped with your kids' understanding of finances in general?
Yes, of course. I think it definitely does. I am quite. They sometimes wonder, and kids always ask, right? They kind of wonder how much you earn and things like that. I don't give them the exact figure, but I do give some context to what they're saying. It's like, this house, the house we're staying at is worth so much, and this is this, and if something happens to me, there's a certain amount of money that mommy will get, etc. All that thing. So. But in other ways, I think I also try to make it real for them in the sense that, I've opened up for each of them kind of like at least a portfolio, which of course, because they're minors, two of them are minors, it's in my name, but it has their name on the portfolio, right? It says, this is Kyle's portfolio, this is Rianu's portfolio, this is Tam's portfolio. And then basically I kind of like park it there. To make it very simple, I use robo-advisors as a way of doing it, and they're quite curious, right? So they look at it, and occasionally I get this sort of like, "Hey, Dad, how's my portfolio doing?" So a little bit of like sort of getting them and so on. Also, my daughter just started university. I remember we had a conversation about 3 years ago. She was talking about universities, and I essentially what I did was to say to her, okay, these are the universities. In the US, it'll cost this much, and in Canada, it'll cost this much. In UK, it'll cost this much. In Singapore, it'll cost this much. In Malaysia, it'll cost this much. And I gave her a budget, right? And I say, look, I think I can afford this. You let me know where you want to go to. And I just made one, and then she says, Dad, what if I get into the best university in the US? Okay, Dad said, if it's the best university in the US, then I'll make an exception. But otherwise, the budget.
So I think I like you bringing up the education part, Malek, because I guess when we take a look at family planning or estate planning or anything, when it comes to a financial plan for your family, financial commitments, education is one of those big financial commitments that parents normally take a look at, right? And we actually discussed this on last week's webinar. If you want to check that out later, after this, of course, you can find it on the BFM Facebook page. Gunnar, I want to take this question back to you. When it comes to financial commitments of a family, how do we prioritize this? Because some families may prioritize retirement more, some may prioritize education more, maybe some families are prioritizing the household mortgage. What's important here? How do we make sense of this?
Yeah, Roshan. So that's why, as I said just now, once you have a life value, definitely you will understand your priorities. But some question to ask within us: what money should do for you? What is important in your life? These are the questions which will trigger the priorities in our life. Question like this will bring awareness about yourself and what you want to achieve in life actually. Another thing I want to say here is please set a financial goal before we write a financial plan. This will lead us to prioritize what actually we want to achieve in our life.
I guess that's the most underrated thing when it comes to finances, right? What is the goal of doing such a thing? I think we often get lost in the actions, like, oh, I want to invest, and you invest in a bunch of things, but because you don't have a goal, you don't have that through thread to guide you through your decision or how long to hold that investment. It can get very complicated and very complex. So a financial goal really is the basis of your actions. Otherwise, it's just kind of messy. Inderjit, do you have anything to add that in terms of prioritizing?
No, not at the moment. No, Roshan, not at the moment.
I can add also the leader of the family should increase their financial literacy level. The higher the literacy level, the lesser mistake they will do. And if possible, please engage a licensed financial planner. That's my advice. Sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult to be unemotional about our own money, including myself. That's the real purpose of having a financial planner. It's not when you hire a financial planner, it's not you are getting a lesser smarter. That's not the intention. The financial planner will look into your strength, your weaknesses to identify all these. So when you know your strength, you know your weaknesses, then it's easier to rectify your mistakes.
So set a financial goal, increase your financial literacy, and maybe even engage a licensed financial planner. Malek, let's move this to you, because I know, I think in your earliest, you've brought this up before on other webinars that you yourself engaged a licensed financial planner. Personally, how important was that for you?
It opened my eyes because I remember at the time I was in that middle ground of like, I think I know, but I don't know all. So it was like kind of like I'm in business. I had already my first venture, second venture, etc. But I kind of like know, but I don't know, right? And sometimes a bit of knowledge is also quite dangerous, right? Without knowing the whole thing. So I think I was just very confused, really about. I was really confused about insurance, for example, and it required for me to sit down. And I remember going to. And I came across a windfall actually, because one of the companies I was involved with listed. I came across a small windfall, and I remember the kind of like recommendations did not make by even private bankers did not make sense. I'm like, why am I giving this money to them for what? And I was like, everyone was trying to sell me products, right? Everywhere I go, everyone's trying to sell me products. I'm like, is there anyone out there that will represent me, right? I don't want them to represent the unit trust. I don't want them to represent the insurance company. I want them to represent me. And I think that was my first realization, is that I had to first find the person or the firm that will represent me. And so I went for I was lucky. There was an article in the newspaper by by this individual. And I'm like, oh, wow, he is representing not the companies, he's representing the individual. And when I found out more, yes, he was a completely independent, fee-only financial advisor. So what happened? A financial planner. I guess Malaysia, we have this intermingling of words. But I think what happened was that literally we sat down and sort of built some comfort with each other. Oh yeah, and then when I spoke to him, it was very clear that the business model, or his business model, was to represent me. And any commissions or anything that companies gave to him, he will return to me, right? So I'm like, okay, that's great. And he charged me a flat fee for a particular financial plan. And I think that was my aha moment. Then I realized that, my gosh, 9 out of 10 people out there are pushing you products. and and actually there's only that small few folks who actually think on behalf of you, and there's even and those folks, this is a test, right? If you ask them the question, okay, how are you representing me or representing the company? Ask them the question. If they are representing the company, then you're like, all right, then you're like, that's one warning bell. The second question is, if they're willing to answer this question, how are you remunerated, right? What's your compensation? Or if the answer is my compensation is from you, that's great. That means, oh yeah, you pay me 3,000-5,000 ringgit for financial plan. That's a good answer. The second good answer is, yes, I do get commissions from the company, but I shall disclose to you all the commissions that I have, and I will guarantee you that I will choose a product, that I will choose something that is good for you first. That's my prime and my foremost consideration. The commissions, I wouldn't care about that, but whatever commissions I get, I will also disclose to you. If you can get someone like that, then oh, okay, wow, this person is willing to disclose what he has. I think that's also okay, because they are disclosing to you everything. So I think that's when my realization came. The biggest fundamental one is, let's find out first whether this individual in front of me, is he representing the company and the products, or is this person, individual, representing me?
Right, thanks for that, Malek. That was actually very in-depth and I think very relatable, especially breaking down the different things you have to pay attention to when you do engage someone that's possibly looking at your finances, or whether it's a financial planner or a particular product. I'm going to just jumping back to you again. So when we take a look at the financial planning aspect, there are many different things that we take a look at: financial commitments, whether it's your debt burden, whether it's your mortgage payments, your education of your children, and retirement as well. How do you, what would be some of the common mistakes you see your clients, again, to some specifics here, of some of the mistakes you've seen clients make? Maybe they prioritize one over the other a little too much, because I know a lot of this comes down to context and your own financial goals and your own family situation. So maybe you can help us, give us some examples here.
Yeah, the very normal mistakes people do is actually I call it lifestyle inflation. So when you started as a graduate, and slowly when your income is increasing, at the same moment your expenses also grow together. So in this case, I will say this is a more money, same problem. There is no opportunity for the family to save more on their financial goals. These are the biggest mistake I've seen in many client of mine itself. Number two is actually the family members. Family members are not in the same page. They are not well communicated. Example, I give you example. The wife maybe wanted to buy a new house, a new home, but the husband says no, the priority should be given to the children's education. So there is a different opinion. It can happen. Sometimes I get questions from client, who should manage the finance, either the husband or the wife. Very difficult. So different opinions, it will be there, but it need to be communicated by whoever is leading the finance. And the number three common mistake I've seen in family financial plan, they think insurance is the investment. I want to tell everyone that insurance is not an investment; it's a protection. I think Malek can explain further on this.
Yeah, Gunnar, just before we move on to estate planning and some of the questions that are coming on FB, if you had to boil down if you had to distill the pillars of financial planning to three, what would be your three most important points when it comes to financial planning? Should I be paying attention to income, expenditure? I mean, these are the things that we often hear about. But when it comes to protection, like you just mentioned, or investment or education planning, what are some of the key, most important things to remember?
Yeah, the first thing I said, financial goal is very important. This is where is the most important. Without a goal or priority, we are not going to lead anywhere. It's something like, we go to the people put you inside the Amazon jungle, you don't know where you're going. It's the same thing. What will happen without a financial goal? Number two is, I think each of us have to have a proper cash flow track. What is your income? What is your expenses? Without knowing what is your income, what is your expenses, there is limited information for us to make a financial decision. It will be impossible for us to move forward. This is the two key things, Roshan. So if the financial goal is clear, their cash flow is good, they can move on to achieve their financial goals.
Inderjit, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, Roshan, just to add on to what Gunnar said, and it's also part of the component of priorities of financial planning. I think families also need to address some emergency fund or like immediate obligation fund and an emergency fund. Immediate obligation would be, your monthly expenses. How do you go about it so that you have enough to sustain in case of an emergency? So these are the two components I noted. A lot of people, don't really look at it because they just keep on spending. They have bad habits.
So these are times. That's the bad times situation, right? When, let's say, what we've seen over the last few months is people have lost incomes, they've lost jobs, and what we're trying to address here is essentially how do you better plan for your family, your finances in good and bad times. So Gunnar, with what Inderjit said there, do your most important points change if it's depending on a good time or a bad time? Let's say someone's lost their job. How does that change? How do you build that financial plan?
Good question, Roshan. So the financial plan should also be very flexible. I give you an example, real example. One of my client is a pilot from Singapore Airlines. There's a lot of pay cuts happening, and the two kids was studying in international school, very well-known international school, and now what they have done is, since the pay cut has come in and they can feel the pinch, they have moved down to a lower cost of international school. So these are the flexibility you should have in the financial plan. At any moment of time, we should have this ability to reduce our lifestyle, rather than now maybe you are driving a BMW. So if you have a pinch of financial problem, then immediately you should have the flexibility to reduce your expenses.
Right, and I think this also plays into managing lifestyle inflation as well, and keeping a buffer for yourself, having those cash buffers for a few months for immediate expenses. Malek, I think we've got some questions on Facebook, right? I think let's get into some of those.
Yeah. So I guess once you've done your financial goals, Gunnar, Inderjit, what is the question from Muhammad Zamri Kamarudin? It says, one question to all panelists: which has more priority, insurance or savings, i.e. protection or savings? And here, let's be clear, we're talking about insurance in the form of protection, not insurance in terms of your investment-linked policy, right? It's really about protection. Which has more priority, protection or savings? Gunnar?
Both, Malek. You need both. But some family financial plans, they think that insurance is the investment. That is something wrong, I will say.
Let's rephrase that question then, Gunnar. Like so both are important. Savings and insurance are the most important. Yes. How do you then divide that priority? So should I save up a little bit first and then get insurance if I have limited cash flow, or should I buy the insurance first split it and buy what I can?
Okay, my suggestion, if you need a protection, you can go for a term insurance. Term insurance will be very much cheaper, and the rest you can invest it for your saving, as a saving. So term insurance is cheap. You can get a higher sum assured, and the balance, there's an opportunity for you to invest, and that will become your saving.
Right.
I can give a personal example as well. For me, I look at what has the bigger consequence on my family, right? So when somebody says, is it insurance or is it saving? What has the bigger consequence? So for me, it's like, if I were to pass away today, and this was like, say, 10 years ago, right? I had can they live on the existing? Can they live on what I had at the time? I think they possibly could, but not comfortably, right? So to me, insurance at the time was more important. That means that if something will happen to me today, to avoid calamity to the family, insurance was more important. I can save later, so I made sure that I could have I have covered myself so that all their needs are covered if something happens to me. So I bought quite a high sum assured insurance, life insurance policy. And the other question is if I got hit by a car and I'm a paraplegic, right? And I cannot, I'm on a wheelchair the whole thing, and I'm brain dead, but they have to keep me alive. It's even worse. So I got myself total and permanent disability for sure. In fact, sometimes I think that's the worst, right? It's okay if you get killed, right? But if you're actually a living zombie, right, and your family has to take care of you, that's an even worse scenario, right? So to me, that was most important. So I think I prioritized protection at the time. Now, interestingly, 10, 15 years later, I built up, I've built up some assets, I've built up some savings and investments and so on. Now the insurance need is actually less. So what did I do this year? Earlier this year, I actually said, okay, I don't need these term life policies anymore. I released them and halved my insurance premiums and everything because I don't need them anymore. So now I'm prioritizing more investment because I've already built a small asset base. I can, that goes on. So it really depends on what, to me, the biggest thing is what's the worst that can happen, and what you want to do is you want to be able to survive that, right? And if the worst means that financial ruin for your family if you were no longer around, then I think you got to protect yourself, and therefore insurance in its pure form, not in its investment form, in its pure form, is the most important thing.
I guess that's really good context there, Malek. Thank you for that, because I guess it really depends on your personal situation and analyzing the worst case scenario. So in your situation, you wanted to protect your family, whatever, even if you had started saving then, that wouldn't be enough to protect your family in the longer run. So but insurance could do that at that point. And that's why I think most of us look to insurance. It's for protection at a point where we can't do it ourselves for the people that we care for. And this brings up the topic of estate planning, right? Yes, Malek, sorry.
Yeah. So let me just twist the scenario a little bit, just change one factor. Supposing that my wife was a high flyer, corporate high flyer, and so on, right? And then actually my view will change, because it'll say, oh, you know what? I'm no longer the sole breadwinner of the family. So something happens to me, it's not a catastrophe. My wife can still support my children on her own. So maybe then my emphasis will not be so much on, there'll be still some insurance, of course, but they will not be as much, because I feel, all right, now I can actually park some of that into savings, right? Or investments. Because my wife is a high flyer, she's almost an equal, she's a breadwinner. So I'm number 2 breadwinner, and she's ahead. Therefore, in fact, if anything, I might even think about getting insurance on her life. So basically, it's about you change that with just one fact, and everything changes. But then you always have this other thing, right? Well, okay, what happens if both of you are on a plane? And then so there's so many permutations. So we really have to just make sure that we understand all the biggest thing that can happen, and then basically you do a financial plan that can survive that kind of calamities.
So I think that's brilliant, Malek. At the end of the day, you've got to, I think Gunnar brought this up earlier, right? You've got to look at your own situation. You've got to know what your cash flow is, where the income is coming from, what do you need to protect. End of the day, what you're doing is, when you're getting protection, is you're protecting the at least part of the future cash flow that you would have gotten from salaries or income in general. So that's why you're protecting yourself with that lump sum that you get, hopefully, if anything should happen to you. And overall, this plays into the larger question about estate planning. This is an important part, not the most popular topic to talk about. Often people think it's morbid, but it's so important if you're talking about protecting your family and your loved ones. Indeed, I think this is where a lot your expertise comes in. When it comes to estate planning, what's the first thing I have to think about?
The first and most important thing when we speak about estate planning, you should look into having a will in place. Because without a will, the laws will dictate when you're no longer around. The Distribution Act in Malaysia will apply to the non-Muslims and how your assets should be distributed. You have a good financial plan, but then sometimes people fail to look into the estate plan component of it. Now, if you ask me honestly, Roshan, I would say that you should start looking at a will first immediately. You know why? Because if you don't have, estates can be frozen for a long time. And if there's a dispute, it's even worse. Because if you look at the statistics today in Malaysia, with Jabatan Accountant Negara itself, that's about 8.8 billion unclaimed monies lying there. This could be used as a stimulus package to drive the economy. But then again, in total, you have about 66.6 billion unclaimed assets belonging to the deceased people. Simply because most nations don't look at will as an important part of financial planning, as they feel it's a taboo subject to talk about. They're too young to look into it. They feel that now is not the time. In fact, the moment you start thinking about financial plan, you should also start looking at estate plan. And the components of writing a will can address a lot of your concerns, like, who should take care of your young children, who should manage your affairs, who should be representing you, like a person, an executor. Should I look at individuals as my executors? Should I look at a corporate trustee as my executor? So these are things that people should look at immediately. Whether you are young or old, it's never too early. It's to start now itself to look at it. Yeah.
And when you look at some, yes, Inder.
Yeah, and part of estate planning, again, I'll go back to having an insurance in place as a form of protection, not only for the family but also for your estate, because you're also looking at in future when I'm not around, I may have liabilities to be paid. Who bears this burden of paying my liabilities? Now that also should be a consideration in estate planning. Yeah, the insurance part insurance is not just for individuals to buy and nominate in beneficiaries, but should also look at how do I mitigate the risk on my estate so that when I'm no longer around, my estate is well managed, well distributed, and all my liabilities are taken care of, and my estate is preserved. Now, these are important elements of estate planning. Yeah.
Actually, Inderjit, I would like to. So that's a very good point, right? The insurance on the estate itself. So, because a lot of times when, let's say, someone who is young, no dependents, there's this thought that you're not life insurance isn't something you need to be paying attention to at that point. But if you've got a loan, right, a mortgage, and something happens to you, that burden does end up with someone else. So, is this the kind of insurance you're talking about? This is the example that you need to pay attention to?
Yeah, you can actually have, when you buy a property, for example, you have a loan, right? You can actually have an MRTA or MLTA, but sometimes those are very expensive form of protection. You may just get a life insurance policy without nominating and using a trust concept to hold those policies and pay off the liabilities on the estate. So you can have a trust. It's just that is not just for the family, but also for your estate to mitigate the risk in future, so that your estate is well preserved. And if there's any balance, it goes back to the estate, and you increase the value of your estate when you're no longer around, Roshan. I think this is a good way of looking at estate planning comprehensively. And I think every financial planner should address, because I've come across, individuals who always tell me, I have a financial plan, but they have not actually touched on wealth distribution a bit because they feel it's not a subject they want to talk about immediately because the family could be too young. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on executor appointment? Because you brought up a few options earlier. What are some of the key criteria that goes into that? Because this can be complicated. I think just to bring in Malek's example earlier about how, thinking about if both parents are traveling in the same flight, that's a situation you need to consider. So there are so many permutations here. What's the step-by-step way to get through this?
Okay, when you have the will, right? So when husband and wife sit down together, they should address what if both of us die in a common tragedy. I mean, we have seen common tragedies like MH17. We have seen 370. These are things that a lot of people do not look at. People dying together, and I feel that when you are doing a will, you should look at the spouse as well, in case both are not around. Then who should take care of the young children? So you need to have the guardian for the young children appointed, because in the law, automatic is the spouse that becomes the guardian. But what if both parents are not around? Someone should manage your affairs and your children together. So you need to find the right candidate to be the guardian of your children. Like, Malek says he has this, a secure place on Google Drive where he has kept all his passwords and all that. But has this particular, planning has also been addressed in your will, Malek? I will let Malek answer that. Because because if you have all those, only you and your wife knows about it. But you should also have a will in place so that somebody else also knows and have access to your information. Now that's very important. Choosing the right candidate. For example, I mentioned executor. You need to have that right individual that you trust to manage your affairs when you are not around.
I confess, only my appointed my guardian for my children does not know my passwords.
And I mean that
you may want to invest in your will.
Okay.
Guna, do you have anything to add to that? Those points there by Inderjit?
Yeah, Roshan. Then normally the perception the people have is actually when they are young, they feel that estate planning is not important. But in my opinion, the estate planning is very much important for young parents actually. If they have minor children, they should take this as a serious action to write a will actually.
There's also some physical mitigation measures. My wife and I never travel together alone on an aeroplane. If we have to travel alone, we take split flights. Say for example, one of us we go to say UK, and it's just the two of us that are going to the UK without our children. We'll take different flights. Is that we're that sort of like our brains are like that. It's a bit morbid, but there we are. Hey, here's a FB question. I think there's something from Lung Chan. He says that graduate salary is so suppressed in today's context. How one is able to generate more income and have more options in financial planning. So just now you talk about young parents, but what about young graduates, right? So they come out of college, they earn 2,005, maybe 3,000 ringgit. I think our starting salaries have not moved a lot since the last 10, 20 years. Should they even start in financial planning at this stage when they feel that they don't have excess income? Guna?
Yeah, definitely, Malek. Nowadays I say financial planning is no more exclusive. Only wealthier people can do financial planning. It's a very necessary thing to everyone. Whether you are middle class, you are B40, you are M40, you are T20. You need financial plan.
Okay. I think one thing I can advise Lung Chan is, for example, even if you are a young graduate, you also receive sometimes in good times, your companies will also give you bonuses, right? So instead of spending the bonus on a car or something like that, put away that bonus into depending on your financial goals, maybe into an investment, for example. And to Lung Chan, I say that there are the best news I think for young graduates of today is that they have options in front of them, a lot of options that we didn't have before. For us, in the old days, we had to kind of like to buy a unit trust. It was like we didn't know how to do it, that kind of thing. Now you can just go online and buy a unit trust. Now you can download an app and buy into funds. And you can go get a robo advisor as well to help you with that. So the beauty about it that now you have access. Before the access was more difficult, but now you have access. But my counsel is any spare cash. Make it a habit of at least putting 10% away if you can. And even if you can't make that habit, when the bonuses come in, put it away. Don't touch that bonus for other things. And don't spend too much on your wedding, please. Just simple tea ceremony. Okay, cukup.
Yeah. Another thing, to add in on Malek, and also increase the literacy level. When you are young, this is the time when you can spend more time in reading. There is a lot of bloggers. I myself follow some bloggers. There's a lot of Facebook groups who shares information. Buying shares, buying properties. So spend your time in increasing your financial literacy level.
Yeah, and the biggest, if you can, this is the one of the biggest skills. If you can find out what are if you have developed a skill for identifying, what is BS or what is scams and BS, I think you've done a fantastic job already from the real thing. I think actually, if you look at these groups, you can tell some which are very speculative, etc., and some which are actually solid investments. If you can develop that skill, through a lot of reading, then I think once you've developed that feeling of what are real investments are others which are hugely speculative, then I think you're on the way to becoming fully financial literate.
A good base, I think, is that if it's too good, if it feels too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. I think it's just a general good rule to check out, because it's just risk management in that sense, right? If
If
it
someone
was too
promises you returns of 30% per month or 30% per annum, I mean, they're smoking something else, lah. But yeah, but if they are actually saying, you know what, if they're saying things like, well, you know what, normally if you invest properly in this days of low interest rates, you're doing well, you're doing about 5%, and you're doing you're doing better than average, you're doing about between 8 to 10%. If they're talking something like that, then they are really whoever you're reading is actually aware of what they're not trying to scam you. They're trying to set your expectations about what are sort of realistic goals for investments.
Right, and now, if you've just joined us, my name is Roshan, and today we are doing a BFM Personal Finance webinar in collaboration with the Financial Planning Association of Malaysia, focusing on family financial planning. And we're today with me, Gunasilin Kanan, licensed financial planner with Blueprint Planning, Inderjit Singh, associate director at CIMB Private Banking, who's also a CFP, certified financial planner, and Malek Ali, founder of BFM Radio and filife. And the realm of the topic that we've entered right now is estate planning. And I think just to wrap up, we're going to take a look at some of the questions we have on Facebook, but also talk about some of the common questions that both of you have experienced from clients with regards to family financial protection and how to address it. Inderjit, could we start with you? What's the most, aside the things that you've already addressed, what is the other most common question you get from people that you talk to?
Okay, the most common, I guess, is how do I protect my assets from bankruptcy? If I go bankrupt when I'm not around, I'm dead. So would my estate be protected from bankruptcy? The answer is no, because when you are not around, okay, your estate will be subjected to bankruptcy processes. So, but there are ways to mitigate by using a trust structure while you're still alive to address your estate planning needs. For example, you may use a trust to transfer your assets which are free from encumbrances and let the trustees hold for you and manage for at least about 5 years and more. That may give the protection from creditors and bankruptcy. That gives an assurance that your estate, okay, even if it goes bankrupt, you have actually, put aside a family fund via a trust, so the family is never, impacted by your bankruptcy when you are not around. Because when you are around, you can always talk and mitigate the risk. But when you are not around, that is the issue. So here, I always suggest people not just look at insurance as part of buying and nominating, but also look as a tool to build your wealth. Even if you go bankrupt, your insurance that can be protected via trust structures can be used as a wealth building tool to provide for a family in future as part of your financial planning. Yeah. So the family, when you are not around, if you are in coma or you are bankrupt, you are gone, at least there's a fund here that can be used via insurance proceeds to sustain the lifestyle of the family. Yeah. That's a way to go. And these are questions most people ask me all the time. How do I protect my assets from bankruptcy? But you start if you already get a petition from the court for bankruptcy, that's too late. Yeah, that's too late.
So, well, Inderjit, what's the baseline for looking into a trust, right? Is it something that everyone should do, or is there a certain wealth threshold where you start looking at trusts? Like, how much does it cost to do? What are some of the details here?
Well, it can be as minimum as 1,500 to get started with an insurance trust, for example. That's not so expensive, and you use that trust to build wealth over time. As your income grows, you start looking at insurance as a form of wealth building tool, rather than just a form of protection. Or if you are of a certain net worth, then you may look at a living trust, which can start from a minimum of 5,000 almost as a setup cost for most trust companies in Malaysia. And I think this is good because it gives you a fair deal of protection from third-party claims, from bankruptcy claims, provided you start now. But most of the time, people start looking at wealth planning and protection when it's too late. When you already have court processes, you have litigation going on, and you want to protect your wealth, that is too late. Yeah, this is the time to start actually. Yeah. Before people sue. Yeah.
So this is right now here. This is what we've been talking about, is the bankruptcy side of things. That's another risk that can impact the family, right? Overall, Guna, from your point of view as a financial planner, what are some of the common questions you get from clients regarding family financial planning and estate planning?
normally they ask how do I going to distribute the wealth, whether to set a will, to write a will or set up a trust. And I personally feel that to set up a trust you need a certain level of wealth. Then the trust will be a useful tool for them. I don't know, maybe Mr. Inderjit can explain. If they have a small amount of assets, then maybe a will and a testamentary trust will do for them. Will be good for them actually. Roshan.
Okay. And Malek, do we have any questions from Facebook that we'd like to address as we
There's
wrap up?
there's some questions from YouTube. So there's one from it's Facebook actually. YouTube is this question from, and I'm just trying to understand this because he says, why are Malaysia insurance term life more expensive than whole life insurance? Insurance agents do not dare answer this question. Did you come across that, Guna? Term life being more expensive than whole life?
I don't think so, Malek. I think the term is cheaper than the whole life. I'm not. Definitely cheaper than the whole life.
I think if you have investment-linked insurance, maybe it's more expensive because it's a different thing altogether. Whole life usually, whether Malaysia or outside, term life is cheaper than whole life. So I think we have a bit of a problem with your premise there. For the gentleman lady from YouTube, Ronnie Ko, I think. Next one, David Wong asked, and this one should be an easy one for you both. How much should you spend on professional advice with regard to your wealth plan? Guna, give me a number.
To start with 2,500.
Okay, 2,500. Inderjit?
Yeah, I think that's a good range from 2,500 to 3,000 to start with. Because a lot of people have this assumption that, engaging a financial advisor, I will need to pay 30,000, 40,000. It's a wrong perception people have. You can start from basic of 2,500 onwards. That's good enough to get a good advice.
Yeah, mine cost 3,000. I remember you said 10 years ago it cost me 3,000. What about you, Guna? You going to say something?
Yeah, if they are fresh graduate, I do charge a lower fee actually, because it's a young professional who is actually very committed. They are really serious on their financial plan, and I do sometimes consider a lower fee actually. It depends on the level of commitment, because when they engage with the financial planner, it's not about the financial planner actually. There's a lot of work which they themselves need to develop the financial. It's the relationship between the financial planner and the client. The financial planner's intention is only one, the client interest first. But there are a lot of work need to be done by the individual actually.
And there's another one from Stefan again, and I think he exhibits a certain frustration, right? Basically, he says most financial planning sessions or investment courses start from the fact that you have already hit some savings, and his frustration, and I think with a lot of people as well, is that most never address the fundamental issue: is that how do you even start amassing funds? I think it's the same, I think a gentleman called Lung Chan earlier asked about graduates, right? How can I even start saving? I know this is no consolation, but hey, Lung Chan, even people working also do have that problem as well. Even making sure that they have that little next egg they can build on. How do you even start if you are if you are really you are living hand to mouth, and you really if you're a white collar professional and things like that, you're living hand to mouth, and then you have this sort of but you want to build an asset and you can't even start. Have you ever been in a situation where it's completely hopeless case and you really cannot start at all?
Guna?
Yeah, Malek, I think if there is a will, there is a way. I started, when I was graduate, I started with a 1,500 basic salary. I still can manage to save about 200 ringgit. So I will look for an opportunity. There is a will, you will definitely find a way. Slowly, and then I start looking for other opportunities. Where can I increase my income? So I develop myself. The skill and the competence of our self also need to be developed to increase the income level, Malek. So all the graduates, you have to start somewhere. This is not the end of the world actually. There's a lot of opportunity you need to go and grab to increase your income. and start your saving.
Inderjit, any thoughts on that? If you like,
No, I agree with Gunnar on that. You need to look into your finances, how much you have, because you know what? When I look at my own background, I had nothing when I first came to KL. I have to start from zero, and I started looking for jobs, and then I studied, and you know, as as my income grew, you know, once I got my degree, then I got a good job, my income started growing. I started putting aside a fund for emergency and also immediate needs, and that grew over time, and you know. You can see that, you know, if you have a will, like what Gunnar said, if you have a will, there is a way. Yeah. So you need to start somewhere. You need to start saving. Like, you know, Malek, you said, you need to look at your bonuses that you receive. How do you actually, you know, save it? And throughout my life, I've saved my bonus to buy a home, to buy my car, to even get my MBA, for example, you know, and that is a procedure that, you know, took me a while, but I achieved it. But so you can achieve something if you have the will power to do it. And most of the time when people get their bonuses, okay, usually they just spend, go for holidays. And then they realize that, you know, they should have invested.
Yeah. I want to share a personal experience. You know, once I graduated, I bought a house, you know. I didn't have any money, you know. I borrowed from my father 2,000 ringgit. And I bought a house. You know, before that, I went through some books, how to buy a property. Without much money, I still start investing, I still start saving. So that's the way you need to develop, look for the opportunity.
Yeah. Roshan, you should be familiar. Whenever we pay BFM bonuses, I usually talk. That's the time when I do a company-wide presentation on investments, and stocks, and shares, and things like that. You know, I just kind of get people in the frame of mind of investment. I think you're familiar with that one, right, Roshan?
I think I first became familiar with that even as an intern. I think it was the first time I saw you would be standing in front and talking about the different things you've invested in. But also, I guess, bringing that awareness of using your bonus to invest, right? So even if you can't do it on a monthly basis through your monthly salary, through other forms. So bonuses, I think what can happen sometimes is when you have that lump sum in front of you, it can look like a lot. And but once you start spending it, it starts disappearing very quickly. So even on Ringgit and Sense, when I talk to some of the other licensed financial planners, one of the things is to take out a savings amount first and start small, even if it's 10 ringgit or 1 ringgit. Just start the process, and maybe that works out a little bit better. But I think there is also the reality on the ground that there are a lot of people who do have certain income constraints, and I guess the only thing to be said the only thing there really is that at those points, maybe it's just for that time you can't save, but it's about starting that process at some point, and hopefully over time building that amassing that. The word is amassing over time, right? Building up those asset base over time. We're in the last 5 minutes now, 5-6 minutes, and maybe we can round this conversation off with. I don't think we've got any more questions on Facebook or YouTube at this point. So, Gunnar, through this entire conversation, we've talked about building that, protecting your family. It essentially comes down to that, right? We've talked about some of the key things when it comes to family financial planning. What are the goals? Are you talking to your family about it? Are they aware of the situation? Be very clear about these things. And then Malek also brought up the really good points when we were talking about protection and savings. At a certain point, early when you don't have a lot of savings, protection can be more important in that situation, taking into context your personal situation. And of course, Inderjit, you walked us through the estate planning, taking and very detailed actually going through that and how important it is. It's something that we don't like talking about, but it's so important because if anything happens to you, you may have all the assets in the world, but if they're stuck in court or in other bureaucratic processes, during that time it takes to get those assets out, your family could be in trouble during that time. So these are the different things we've got to take into consideration. Get that will sorted immediately. We're going to take all that into consideration. What would still be the most important thing from a family financial planning point of view? If there was one thing you wanted people to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
I will say, please take note on your lifestyle inflation. That is the, I think, the most vulnerable things, which is will actually damage the finance of the family or the individual. Lifestyle inflation.
Yeah, Inderjit, what about you? One key point you
I would
want
say that, I would say that, better get a will done as soon as possible. Don't wait until something happens, because, if you wait until a tragedy happens, then it's just too late. Yeah.
So okay, let's just talk about that for a minute. What do I need for a proper will? What do I just take out a piece of paper, write down, I say this, and then sign it? What that's typically what you see in the movie, right? Someone takes out a napkin, I give this to you, sign. Here you go. So maybe in just a minute, tell us what are the essential parts to will writing.
Okay, the essential parts of will writing will be to address the first and most important part will be the appointment of an executor. You need to have this person appointed because this person will represent you to get the necessary court processes, which is the grant of probate. Then, if you're a young family with young children, then you need to look at appointing a guardian for your minor children. You can't just leave it, if I'm not around, my wife will be around to take care of the children. What if there's a common tragedy? Somebody has to be. So you need to have that person appointed as well as a backup guardian. Then you need to find 2 witnesses. You can't just have a piece of paper, which, we watch in Bollywood movies and Hollywood sometimes. They just have this, piece of paper and a guy gives a dying declaration and have, no witnesses. The will requires 2 witnesses who should be independent. Because beneficiaries cannot be witnesses, or the spouse of the beneficiary cannot be a witness in the will. But I've come across people actually making mistake of, I give it to my son, his wife will be the witness. Now, that kind of wills can be disputed. So the important components of a will should be the executor. If you have minor children, the guardian has to be addressed, and the 2 witnesses, which has to be independent from the family, so to avoid any undue influence in future.
All right. And Malek, one thing you want to make sure that you want to point out from this conversation?
I think, sort of, again, plan, as I say, plan for the worst, right? So, basically, if look at all the different scenarios, your life, your wife's life, both of you, plan for the worst and have a plan for that. But then once you've sorted that out, then you have a peace of mind to then focus on, building your wealth. So, for me, it's always, looking at what the worst can happen. I apply that in business as well. What's the worst that can happen if you enter a new business, etc.? Okay, I'll lose this much, and this is my plan if I lose this much. Okay, fine. And then after that, then do your business and things like that. Likewise, with plan for the worst, and then look at the opportunity after you set that aside, set the premiums aside, or things to mitigate that worst case scenario. Then you can have peace of mind and apply it to things that you really want to grow how to grow this nest egg, right? It's a business, it's stocks, it's shares, it's this and that. So to me, always plan for the worst.
Thank you, the 3 of you, for joining me today. We've covered quite a lot of ground, a lot of information dispersed in a very short amount of time, actually, particularly in the last 20, 30 minutes. To Kanesan, today on the show, I had Kanesan, licensed financial planner with Blueprint Planning, Inderjit Singh, associate director at CIMB Private Banking, also a CFP, and Malek Ali, founder of BFM Radio and filife. I'm Roshan, and this has been a BFM Personal Finance webinar done in collaboration with the Financial Planning Association of Malaysia. Now, we've got another webinar happening this week. How do you ensure you have a solid digital marketing plan in place during the COVID-19 season? Well, you can find out with BFM Enterprise Back to Business series, where they'll be exploring marketing in the new norm, September 24th, 1:30 p.m. So you can go to bfm.my/events/back to business to find out more about that. And on that note, thank you all of you on Facebook and YouTube land for joining us today. Hope you learned something. Feel free to keep asking your questions, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Roshan. Thank you, everyone.